everyone, this is Warhawk Beyond 2040, bringing to you another edition of the Wrestling Discussion Series. And March 14th, 2004 marks 20 years ago that The Undertaker made history when he made his epic return as the Deadman at WrestleMania 20. And for today's edition, I am going to be talking about the success and failures of the return of the Deadman from March 2004 to December 2004. So, after many years of portraying the dark, mysterious Deadman character, The Undertaker abandoned it in the 2000s and debuted the American Badass gimmick at Judgment Day 2000. And the biker gimmick was a drastic change as far as myself and many hardcore loyal fans were concerned. Gone were the long trench coats, hats, hooded robes in favor of jeans, leather jackets, shades, and bandanas. And this was a much more human based Undertaker than anything we had ever seen before in the past. And he would later transform into Big Evil after turning heel in November 2001 when he attacked JR and forced him to kiss the backside of the boss, Vince McMahon, all in the name of respect. And he would even further shock fans by cutting off his long trademark hair and sport a much more shorter buzz cut haircut. And in my honest opinion, the Big Evil gimmick worked very well. He went on to win the Hardcore title, the undisputed WWE title, and feuded with Ric Flair, The Rock, Triple H, Brock Lesnar, who he really helped put over in a huge way as the next big star for the WWE. Kurt Angle, you name it, The Undertaker mixed it up with everyone in his Big Evil gimmick and was a huge part of the success of the SmackDown Blue brand during the Ruthless Aggression era. But just like myself and all of you, we all yearned for the return of the Deadman. And I didn't really think we were ever going to see the Deadman ever again because, the business had changed, things had moved on. Undertaker seemed quite happy doing his biker gimmick. And don't get me wrong, I didn't really enjoy the biker gimmick that much, but I did like the Big Evil run a lot. But I felt it was really starting to get stale, and I was really hoping for a change. And I thought to myself, it's really time to bring the old Undertaker back, or some version of that character, because I really felt that the whole biker gimmick thing had gone as far as it could go, really. I mean, by that point, he had been doing the biker gimmick for well over 3.5 years. So that's almost 4 years for a gimmick. And I didn't really think it was going to last that long. So fast forward to Survivor Series 2003. The Undertaker competed in his final match in the Big Evil gimmick when he lost a buried alive match against Vince McMahon with a shocking assist from Ross Kane, who helped the boss bury his half brother alive. And this was a time where we still had the internet, but it wasn't as strong and powerful as it is now. There was no sightings of The Undertaker, no photographs, no news about whether or not he was coming back. And I wasn't one of those people who thought, oh, he's done, because I knew in the back of my head, they can't leave it like that. It would be so stupid just to leave it like that. He is coming back, but the question is, how will he come back? Will he come back as the biker, or will it be something completely different? So, fast forward to January 2004, we've got our first sign of a return when, during the Royal Rumble match, Kane came out, laid everybody out with multiple choke slams, and we was waiting for the next entrance to come out, and then the lights went out. We heard that legendary gong, and the whole place just completely went crazy. I remember me and my best friend sat there and looked at each other and thought, no way. Are they really going to do this? Are they really going to bring back the original Undertaker? And it was a huge, shocking moment because prior to this, Kane delivered a eulogy for The Undertaker back in November after Survivor Series, talked about how Undertaker portrayed himself and basically became a human, showing compassion for Stephanie McMahon and showing that he cared, and pretty much going on to say that monsters don't have feelings, they live to destroy, they are not human. Pretty strong coming from a guy like Kane, who, as far as I'm concerned, once he took that mask off, he was no longer the big red machine. Yes, he did go on to do some epic stuff and had a crazy wild feud with Shane McMahon, but it wasn't Kane. But that's another story for another time. But it wasn't until the night after the Royal Rumble 2004 pay per view we started getting creepy videos and music and dark lights, and it looked like WWE were actually going to pull the trigger with this one. We were actually going to get the return of the Deadman. But the question was when, where, and how. So as the weeks went on, The Undertaker would play mind games with Kane, continuous blackouts, dark lights, creepy videos, rain. I thought that was a really cool touch. Caskets, rings moving, you name it. Kane was on the receiving end of all forms of psychological torture from The Undertaker. And we finally learned that The Undertaker was returning at WrestleMania 20 as the Dead Man when Kane came out, ordered Vince McMahon to make it all stop. And Vince said, I'm going to make things right. It's going to be Undertaker versus Kane at WrestleMania 20. So not only was the return confirmed, but Undertaker was returning to compete in a match. And for me, this was actually, as far as I could remember, we were actually going to see a return at WrestleMania and actually return for a match. I mean, most guys, when they do make a return of some sorts, it's not really a return. They'll just make like a little appearance, maybe beat someone up, and then go home. We were actually getting a full fledged return. And now the bigger question was, what Undertaker were we going to get? Me and my best friend, we speculated for weeks on end. Could it be the ministry gimmick? Could it be the Lord of Darkness gimmick from 1988, which was our personal favourite? Was it going to be the purple glove Undertaker from 1984? Was it going to be the original with the grey gloves? Or was it going to be something we've never seen before? We just constantly speculated about what Undertaker were we going to see. No doubt we were going to see the Dead Man, but was it going to be any of those old ones, or was it going to be something new and up to date? So we got to WrestleMania 20, Kane came out, he waited and waited, and then the lights went out, and then we heard the "Oh yes!" and out comes the legendary manager of The Undertaker, Paul Bearer. This moment really shocked me and my best friend. We couldn't believe it. Paul Bearer here at WrestleMania 20. I mean, we hadn't seen Paul Bearer since 2000 when he was with Kane. And prior to that, he was with The Undertaker doing the ministry back in 99. And here he was back with The Undertaker. What an unbelievable moment to have Undertaker's manager slash friend back on his side. Because really and truly, in my honest opinion, if Undertaker had come out on his own, still would have been an epic moment. The place would have still gone mad. But to have Paul Bearer back on his side, that just made the deal even more sweeter and more emotional because we would learn years later that Paul Bearer almost didn't make it. He suffered a heart attack weeks earlier. Vince McMahon and JR paid for his treatment and operation, and it looked like we weren't going to have Paul Bearer back on his side. And also another interesting factor to this story as well. Undertaker didn't want to do the Deadman gimmick again because he looked at it as a step backwards. And I can appreciate that. You know, you're all about going forward. Why would you want to go back to something old that's already been done? And he wasn't really sure that the fans would care about it. And I remember sitting there with my best friend after Paul Bearer came out, the lights went out again, we heard the gong, fans were going mad. I remember my heart was racing really fast. Oh my god, what Undertaker are we getting? Come on, I really want to see it. And then he finally came out, and he came out in a long leather trench coat and a hat. And I thought, holy cow, this looks so cool. Then, when he got in the ring and he took his hat and coat off, I was a little bit disappointed. He pretty much was wearing the Big Evil attire, black vest, dark grey leather pants, and he didn't look any different. The most difference was his hair was a little bit longer and was black, but not much longer like 1997 to 1988 time. He just pretty much looked like Big Evil, and I was really disappointed. I remember my best friend's reaction was, "What the hell is this?" You know, we were so disappointed. I thought all this time, all this build up, we were told we were getting the Deadman, and instead all we got was a darker Big Evil. Really disappointed. It was great to see Undertaker back. Don't get me wrong. The entrance was cool, but it wasn't really what we wanted to see. He made short work of Kane. The match lasted about 7 minutes, 7.5 minutes. Wasn't as good as their first match at WrestleMania 14, but it wasn't really about that. It was all about The Undertaker getting his revenge on Kane for burying him alive and helping Vince McMahon win that match. That was what it was all about. And I get that, but we could have had different attire. And I was so disappointed. Then I learned even later on that Undertaker, as I said already, didn't want to do the Dead Man character. And Bruce Pritchard said, "Well, I'll tell you what we can do. You could be the Dead Man in character, but you can be Big Evil in the ring." So what we got instead was kind of like a hybrid mix. So we had the Dead Man and the Biker all wrapped up in one, which I suppose kind of makes sense in a way, but I still wanted to see the Dead Man. But it was a cool moment seeing Undertaker and Paul Bearer back together after many years, and it was great. But I suppose looking back at it now, it's kind of worked out for the best. So then, fast forward to SmackDown after WrestleMania 20, Undertaker came out, and this is where things got more annoying. Undertaker came out and wore a bandana, and he just looked like Big Evil. I just thought, what are we doing? We're supposed to be the Dead Man. Why are we still looking like the Biker? Come on. So he laid out Paul Heyman, who was part of that screw job back in October 2003 after No Mercy. So the bandana was kind of like a reminder that I hadn't forgotten what you did to Big Evil. So yeah, the build up itself, excellent. Got to give Kane 10 out of 10 for carrying the whole build up by himself. And The Undertaker never showed his face once. And it just shows you how strong of a character and wrestler The Undertaker is and how over he is. He doesn't even have to be on the show to get big pops. All you've got to do is black out the lights, ring that gong, and the place will go nuts. And got to give Kane his props to carry a whole build up by himself. It takes some doing, it takes a lot of hard work. Not many wrestlers can pull that off, but when you've got two strong characters like The Undertaker and Kane, they're the only two that can pull this off. And another guy I have to give credit to for carrying a whole build by himself is the late great Bray Wyatt, who did an amazing job building up The Undertaker's return for WrestleMania 31, which will be talked about for another time. So after The Undertaker destroyed Kane, destroyed Paul Heyman, he would engage in his first proper post WrestleMania feud when he mixed it up with Booker T. Now, this was actually a really good feud. Anytime you get Booker T, you know you can rely on him to deliver good stuff, and he's one of the true legends of wrestling. Undertaker and Booker T, they've done some pretty good stuff in the past. So having Booker T as the first major opponents after Undertaker's return to the Deadman gimmick was a good choice. I would have preferred if it was Brock Lesnar, but he had already gone from WWE by that point. So it was a good start with Booker T. Nice little warm up. And they had a great match at Judgment Day. They had a nice little feud for about 3 weeks, little build up there. And it was great. It was a really good, fun build up. Kind of reminded me of some of that crazy stuff they used to do back in the mid 90s, the whole supernatural thing. Booker T did an amazing job in putting over The Undertaker as a true force of nature. And same with Kane as well. He did an excellent job making The Undertaker feel like a real godlike being. And yeah, we got off to a really good start. And Undertaker's look started to change a bit more. His hair was getting a bit longer. The pants were getting a bit darker. So yeah, we could see that The Undertaker was slowly moving away from the biker and transitioning more into the traditional dead man we know, but just different for today. So after that feud was done, Paul Bearer would get abducted by the Dudley Boys after realigning themselves with Paul Heyman, and we got a concrete crypt match as well. Yeah, some of this stuff wasn't great, but I like the idea that Undertaker kind of turned heel and aligned himself with Paul Heyman. That was really interesting, and I would have liked to have seen more of that. And, we know the history between Paul Heyman and Taker. Undertaker, of course, is an old Paul Heyman guy from the late 80s to the early 90s. He worked alongside Paul Heyman. So these two had great chemistry together. And it was cool to see Taker as a heel, sort of. He laid out Rob Van Dam and John Cena, had a great match with John Cena the following week on SmackDown. They really tried hard to put over The Undertaker as a heel, but there's just one problem with that. You can't boo The Undertaker. The fans love him too much. In fact, I would probably say, as a heel, the fans love him even more. So, what can you do? So, at the Great American Bash 2004, The Undertaker defeated the Dudley Boys in a handicap match, which was okay. Wasn't the greatest handicap match I've ever seen, but it was okay for what it was. And all we kept saying and hearing from Paul Heyman was, do the right thing. We didn't know what the right thing was. And after he saved Paul Bearer, he buried him alive in concrete cement. Pretty horrific stuff on TV to see someone essentially getting killed off before our very eyes. And I was a little bit sad because I really loved seeing Paul Bearer and The Undertaker back together. But I understand why they did what they did. Paul Bearer was still having health issues, so they had to find a way to write him off TV. I would have done it this way. I wouldn't have killed him off like that. I just think that was a little bit too drastic. I think what they should have done was a promo on SmackDown. Undertaker comes out first, calls Paul Bearer to the ring, and just says something about it's time for the dead man to walk alone. I cannot walk the shadow of the valley of death with you by my side. I have to go it alone. But I will see you on the other side of evil. And that would have been fine. So you could have left the door open for Paul Bearer to return. No hard feelings, no betrayals, nothing like that. But yeah, I suppose they had to do what they did. Paul Bearer wouldn't return to TV till 2010. So, wow. It's a really long time. So after The Undertaker got done with Paul Heyman and the Dudley Boys, he would enter himself into a WWE title program against John Bradshaw Layfield, aka JBL, who had just won the WWE title from Eddie Guerrero at that same pay per view. And it's interesting about 2004. 2004 was a year of transition for both The Undertaker and Bradshaw. Undertaker returned as the Dead Man. Bradshaw turned himself into JBL and ditched the APA and Farouk. So it's interesting, two cornerstones and founding members of the Ministry of Darkness were now on opposite sides as two completely different people. And it was great. I had reservations about an Undertaker and JBL feud. I know Undertaker and Bradshaw, they faced each other a couple of times in the past, but they weren't really what you would call great matches. They were just like fights, just brawls. I always felt that The Undertaker and Bradshaw worked better together as a team. Like the Ministry of Darkness when The Undertaker and the Acolytes were on the same page. I thought they worked better as, teammates rather than opponents. But they surprised me. They really did. And Undertaker went after JBL's WWE title, and their feud was really good. A lot better than I expected it to be. It was a really good, fun feud with some nice callbacks to the Ministry of Darkness. And for me, this feud with The Undertaker really helped cement JBL as the big heel for SmackDown. And, he was like a throwback to the old heel champions of like the late 80s and early 90s. He wasn't the greatest wrestler in the world, but he always found a way to win. He'd always get some cheap victory with some interference or just any form of dirty tactics to get ahead. And I thought JBL portrayed that very, very well. And before we move on, JBL's WWE title reign, the success and failures will be covered on this series very soon. So make sure you don't miss that. So anyway, Undertaker and JBL, they had an okay match at SummerSlam. It was okay for what it was. Then a couple months later at No Mercy 2004, they had a fantastic first ever last ride match, and it was brilliant. I still say to this day, this is The Undertaker and JBL's best match they ever had. And we saw Gangrel, we saw Viscera return. They were pretty much bought out by JBL and they attacked their former leader. We saw the Ministry symbol come back. We saw Orlando Jordan get sacrificed to the Undertaker's symbol. So we saw plenty of nice callbacks to the Ministry of Darkness days. And just like always, JBL always found a way to win. At SummerSlam, Undertaker got himself disqualified, therefore allowing JBL to retain his title. And at No Mercy, JBL, with a shocking assist from Heidenreich, helped beat The Undertaker and stuffed him in the back of the hearse. And Heidenreich would run a lorry into the back of the hearse, crushing The Undertaker and putting him out of action for a few weeks. So by this point, the return of the Deadman did get off to a bit of a weird start, seeing him in the big evil attire and the bandana. But over the course of time, this character really started to grow on me a lot. As I said, once his hair got longer, the beard got more thicker, his attire got more darker, and he was no longer looking like big evil. He was looking like the Deadman, but just different, just more of a 21st century feel to it. And I really enjoyed it. I think around Judgment Day 2004 against Booker T, this is when I really started to accept this version of The Undertaker. And by SummerSlam 2004, with the feud against JBL, yeah, I pretty much was digging this. So it took a while for me to grow on this, but eventually I started to like it more. So after Undertaker got done with JBL, he would go after Heidenreich and they would have a match at Survivor Series 2004, which was surprisingly not bad. Wasn't the greatest match, but I thought it was pretty decent for what it was. And then after that feud would get done, Undertaker would go back into the championship hunt and have another crack at JBL. And we would see a fatal four way with JBL, Undertaker, Booker T, and Eddie Guerrero. And believe it or not, this was the only time that Undertaker and Eddie Guerrero were ever in the same ring at a pay per view. Shocking, especially with two of the most popular guys on SmackDown at that time. Never had a match on pay per view or even on SmackDown. It's crazy. So Undertaker once again got screwed, and Heidenreich cost him the match. JBL retained the title. So once again, Undertaker didn't win the WWE title. I would have loved Taker to win the title just to cement his return back to the Deadman. Even if he just held it for like a month and lost it back to JBL, I would have been fine with that. But it's a bit of a shame that he never won the title again. But it is what it is. But it was great to see Taker back on top form, much more faster, leaner than ever before. Had some great, fun, entertaining feuds and some cool segments. And yeah, it was nice to see a bit of old school, but translated into the modern era. It was very well done, and it was great to see the Dead Man back. And it truly was a breath of fresh air. You know, after many years of the biker, it was great to see the Undertaker back to his old self, doing what he does best, and that's striking fear into the hearts of fellow wrestlers alike. And as the man himself would always say, digging holes and taking souls. Absolutely loved it. So, in terms of the success and failures of Return of the Dead Man, yeah, as I said already, it got off to a shaky start, a bit of a weird one for me, but over time, things started to get really good. But yeah, there was no failures. Definitely no failures. As I said, it just got off to a bit of a weird start in terms of his appearance, but overall, I'd say a complete success. I really enjoyed the Return of the Dead Man, and it was a lot of fun. It's hard to believe it was 20 years ago that as the Undertaker walked out at WrestleMania 20 as the Dead Man in Madison Square Garden. Still get chills seeing, the crowd reaction. I was a little bit bummed out because I thought that the crowd pop was a bit weak. But then I came across a video on YouTube years later that someone made live, and I actually saw and heard the pop. It was nuts. Just goes to show that television doesn't always do its justice for certain things. You have to really be there to see it. But yeah, the fans were happy to see the Dead Man back. I was, so was my best friend. We were all happy. We loved it. It was a great time to be a wrestling fan, and another reason to watch SmackDown, and another reason why SmackDown was better than Raw. Enough said. So that's going to be it from me. I'm going to wrap this up now. What's your favourite moments from the Return of the Dead Man? Did you enjoy his feud with Booker T? Did you enjoy his feud with JBL? Did you enjoy the little weird program with Paul Heyman and the Dudley Boys? Did you enjoy that little rivalry with Heidenreich? What was your thoughts on The Undertaker returning to the Deadman character? Were you happy? Would you have liked to have seen something completely different in terms of his attire? Or did you like the hybrid mix of the biker and the Deadman? You know what to do, guys. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave your thoughts and comments down below, and I will see all of you next time for another edition of the Wrestling Discussion Series. So until then, take care, everybody, and stay safe. And once again, as always, much appreciated. Thanks for listening.